Well, hi. Welcome to Mr. Dyer's Musings. I'm Mr. Dyer, and I appreciate you joining me today as we take a look at how to keep the body regulated when you're out in the field. And the body, takes more than just the proper clothing, and it certainly takes more than just the proper equipment to be safe outside. So today, I'm going to give you some hints and tricks so that you can succeed out in the field with some good comforts. Stay with me. As always, I'd like to thank my wife and family for their unconditional support. I'd like to thank you guys, my viewers, for taking the time to watch this video. If you're new to the channel, check out my other videos. I've got a ton of historical campcraft and American Civil War videos that I'm sure you'd be interested in. If you're new to the channel, also consider subscribing and don't forget to click the bell button. That way you're made aware of all the new stuff that comes out. I'd like to thank my patrons on Patreon for supporting us. Thank you so much if that's something you're interested in. Even if you're just going to throw a buck or two at us, we really appreciate it. Help keep this channel moving forward. So today we're going to be taking a look at our internal body temperature. In the past, we discussed how the layering system is really important. Well, today we're going to discuss how also it is important in eating right and preparing yourself for going outdoors, especially in the cold winter months. We tend to forget that in the summer when we're hot and we're out in the heat and we're sweating and everything. Remembering to hydrate is a little bit easier to keep in mind because we're sweating it as fast as we're putting it in us. In the winter months, it's just as important to hydrate. In the colder months, because your body temperature is for the most part comfortable as long as you wear the layers, we don't take in consideration what we're sweating and what the energy inside of us is producing and requiring to keep our temperature regulated. So we need to make sure that we hydrate. And on top of this, we also need to consider what we eat. Because even though we may have all the right layers on and staying warm in that way, we also need to make sure that our internal body temperature is warmed up by drinking and eating hot beverages and hot warm foods. In the summer, you want to do the opposite. Again, you got to think about your internal body temperature. So in the middle of the day, you're probably not going to be eating soups and stews in a 98-degree weather. No, you're probably thinking cold cut sandwiches, peanut butter and jelly, or maybe Nutri-Grain bars or something like that to keep you going. In the winter months, though, we need to think about our hydration. We need to think about drinking either coffees and teas and drinking soups, anything that's going to be able to be kept for long periods of time um, as you hike or as you're moving around or sitting in a deer stand. And then when you need to, you can bring it out and it's warm and you get that comfort. And there's just something about, midday on a deer hunt. You've been sitting out there the whole time. You haven't seen a deer or got a shot at anything. And you pour that nice hot cup of coffee. Now I know there's some purists out there who don't want anything that has a strong scent and they won't do it. My dad, he was a big fan of drinking coffee. I'm also a big fan of drinking coffee. I don't like tea. Horace Kephart, who I refer a lot to and who I'm going to continue to refer to a lot in this deer camp series, he strongly suggested having something like tea or coffee. He preferred tea over coffee. Coffee has the caffeine. Some of your darker teas also have caffeine. But either one is going to help you with your energy, but also keep your internal body temperature warm. Horace Kephart also suggested sugars. He said that sugar is one of the most important pleasantries that could be taken on a long journey. And that should also be in consideration when you're sitting still and maybe you're dozing off, and you don't get that shot because you fell asleep. So even if you're drinking tea, maybe adding a little bit of sugar in there will help you, because it's immediate energy. Now, granted, it's going to burn off a lot faster, but if you need immediate calories, immediate energy, sugar is the way to go. It could literally mean life and death. Those of you who may be struggling with diabetes, you definitely need to consider alternatives and what your needs are. So what we're going to discuss today is an artifact that's related to something that I grew up with. My dad, and this isn't my dad's, I don't know what happened to my dad's, I'm still trying to find it, but my dad used to carry an Aladdin Stanley Thermos. He was a truck driver in the 70s. I think that's when he probably got his. And when he'd go out on hunts or when he'd go out on long campouts in the cold winter months, he'd take his Stanley Thermos. And it was an awesome asset to have. And I always look forward to when he'd pour me a cup to try and my brother a cup to try. So it's kind of a long-standing tradition. I now purchased my son his own Stanley Thermos, so when we go out in the deer blind, he's not pilfering all my coffee. The one that we're going to take a look at harkens back to the beginning of the Stanley Thermos Company. Now, William Stanley, he used to work in the electrical insulating business, like the insulators that would be on top of the electrical poles. He liked to go to work and have a hot cup of coffee all day. And even before he developed his rendition of the thermos, he used what were known as the insulated glass bottles. And they were essentially the same shape, the same features and everything, but he tweaked something really important that revolutionized how we use insulated bottles. The old bottles used glass, so you would have a steel casing, and then in between you'd have an air, the vacuum space, and then you would have glass, and that would keep your coffee hot for a long period of time. And it was certainly a luxury. Not everybody could afford a Stanley Thermos back in the early 1900s, or even the vacuum bottles in the early 1900s. The money would set you back quite a ways, so it was a luxury. But he took his idea of the insulating properties, and he did a dual wall steel thermos, and inside, in between both walls, he packed it with charcoal dust, and that's where he came up with the Charvac. And it added a lot of weight. This is much heavier than what this one is. In fact, this is about the third of the weight as this. So you would have your steel outside, and it would be painted. On the inside of that, you would have your charcoal dust. On the inside of that, you would have another steel wall that was then enameled, and that would give you a little more protection, especially over time. Now, Horace Kephart, he always promoted the use of enamelware, just like what this cup is. What's nice is that it would insulate. So if it was an aluminum cup and it was a nice hot cup of coffee, just pressing your lips to an aluminum cup or even a steel cup with a hot cup of coffee, it could burn your lips. And that's not very comfortable. So the enamelware allowed that. The problem is that with enamelware, when it gets really cold and you put a hot liquid inside of it, it has a tendency to crack and then chip. So that was something that he warned us about. But this is a rather large thermos, and they made ones that were a lot smaller than this. I picked this one up because it was an oddity, and as you know, I love oddities. If I find something that seems pretty unique, I tend to go towards that one. But it is heavy. It weighs about 9 pounds, all in itself. It has the top bail over here, which I wouldn't suggest using it to twist the bottle, but it gives a nice handle to carry it. As we open it up, it gives you a cup. Now, unlike our contemporary cups that sit flat, this one does have a tendency to teeter a little bit. But it doesn't teeter so much that it would be uncomfortable if you put a liquid in there and use it to drink. Next, you would have your cork stopper. Now, as you can see, this cork stopper also has a wooden handle to hold it. and the opening is rather large. And as you can see, it's got a blue enamelware, really, really dark. It's hard to see. What's nice about it is it does have a lip that goes in. Now your smaller bottles were able to retain heat a lot better than this one does. This one, after putting in a fresh pot of coffee, the peak of it being really hot is about 10 hours. After that, it loses its temperature significantly, and it's more or less just room temperature. I did open it up the following morning, and it was still slightly warmer than room temperature. It was 78 degrees, but it wasn't the piping hot cup of coffee that I started with the day before. But that's a long period of time when you think about it. That's certainly long enough for a day's worth of work. Now this holds an entire pot of coffee, so that's 12 cups. That's a lot of coffee if you're going hunting, but if you're sitting on a deer stand, and again, you're regulating that temperature, that's pretty important. This is not something that you would take on a backpacking trip. This goes back to the idea of either having a base camp, like what we're demonstrating here, not necessarily a scout camp. That way, you can drop off all your gear using a car, and then as you go hunting, you scout away from your base camp, and you might take just the necessities. So taking this on a short distance in a prepared area where you already scouted and you know where you're going to sit for the deer wouldn't be such a bad thing. But if you're going hiking for miles, this is not something that you would want to carry. You'd probably then want to refer to carrying your dry ingredients and heating up your water, your cup of coffee or whatever, using a nearby water source. But this Stanley Thermos is a testament to the ingenuity of a man that we still can appreciate today. When you think about all the vacuum water bottles that are sold today, a lot of that kind of goes back to Stanley's invention of having a dual wall vacuum thermos that used metal instead of metal and glass, so that glass doesn't break. No one likes to have broken glass in their cup of coffee. So I hope you enjoyed this video. You learned something from it. If you liked it, please click like. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button. Do me a favor and do that. That way, when these videos come out, you're notified. And if you have any comments, please leave them below, especially stories. Like I said, thermos seems like a simple object, but I have a lot of really good memories of my father and him using one. And that's something that I now pass down to my own children. And that's the beauty of connecting history with artifacts and history with your own personal story. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Give a kiss and hug to your loved ones, and take care.